So welcome, Nick. I think we are now recorded. So um, very kind of you that you are willing to continue from where we left last year, from the celebration of the IMI 50 years, and preserving our lineage, preserving the history. It was very kind that you gave that talk. And yeah, it turned out it was you could not cover the whole 50 years. So that's why we would like to continue. I'm very kind that you accepted this invitation to continue. So yeah, I think to the public, maybe you can introduce yourself again for those maybe who missed a little bit out, and then we are happy to hear again from you. There might come Italian translation in a few moments, but then we will see. Yeah.
Okay. So again, thank you for having me. I'm Nick Ribush. I'm director of the Lama Yeshe Wisdom Archive in Boston, and I've been involved with the FPMT since 1972, pretty much full time since then. So part of the story is the first part of this talk, and
Yes.
I was involved with the beginning of the IMI in 1973. At that point, the Lamas had been teaching Westerners since coming to Nepal in '69, and 2 or 3 of them had become ordained. Zena, of course, the first Western disciple, in '68, I think, in Dharamsala, and around 1970, Sister Max and Anila Ann got ordained in Dharamsala, I think by Geshe Repton, and the first monk was Jampa Sangpo, Jampa Shainaman. He was ordained 71 or 72, I think. But then in '73, after the 5th course, about 10 of us wanted to become monks and nuns. So that was the end of 1973. Lama agreed, but said we need to form an organization for the FPMT monks and nuns. So he called us into his room, I think it was December the 15th, '73, and said we're going to call the organization the International Mahayana Institute. And then we all went off to Bodh Gaya for the Kala Chakra initiation from His Holiness at the beginning of January '74. And then on the 14th of January, 10 of us were ordained. And then we came back to Kopan and we started activities as a Western Sangha group, the IMI. So then over the subsequent years, maybe 5 or 10 more Westerners got ordained. And last time I got up to 1976, when there were probably 40 or 50 of us. And we got kicked out of Nepal. We went to Dharamsala and we rented some broken down old buildings at the back of what was called Mortimer Hall, which is where the liaison office is, the Indian government liaison office with His Holiness's the people across. There are 2 sort of adjacent hills. So we stayed there for the summer of '76. We called it the Inji Gompa. And actually, then after that, we went back. We never really used it again as a group for IMI. Then some other monks who were studying at the dialectic school, Georges Dreyfus, Sangye Samdrup, first Western Geshe, stayed there. Gareth Sparham stayed there. And then Anila Kama Lekshi Tsomo stayed there while she was studying at the dialectic school, and then she basically took the property over and formed Jamyang Churlin Nunnery, which is now producing Geshimas. And I was in Australia recently and met one of them there. So after spending the summer in Dharamsala '76, all the Sangha, there were about 15 or 20 of us, we came back to Kopan for the course at the end of 76, which would be the 9th course. And that was led by Dieter Kratzer. He was a German monk, took Konchog Sherab. He was one of 6 people ordained by Lati Rinpoche in Dharamsala in January 75. So then after the course, Lama Yeshe started teaching one of the Maitreya texts, Uta Namche, and Lama continued teaching that over 5 or 6 sessions, either at Kopan or at Manjushri Institute in England. So that was one of the more important teachings Lama Yeshe gave. He also gave on one of the other 5 Maitreya texts, Cheni Namche. He taught that in the spring of 1977 when he went to Madison, Wisconsin at Geshe Zopa's request to look after Geshe Zopa's students, Dharma students, while Geshe Zopa was on sabbatical. But just going back to the beginning of 77, so we were all at Kopan leading the IMI Sangha life, which was getting up in the morning before breakfast and doing jorcha, and then we had breakfast. Then two people took it in turns to do the cooking for the day, and so there was a kind of a rotating system. And we did puja, we had breakfast, then people did individual study or different work. A number of us were involved in transcribing and publishing, editing and publishing the Lama's teachings, just locally at Kopan. We had a printing machine there. And Geshe Jumpa Gyatso, who was our teacher for the time there before he went to Italy, he started giving us teachings on the Abhidhamma Kosha. So now it's the beginning of 77. In 76, the Lamas went to Manjushri Institute in England, and Lama Yeshe had a vision of that becoming sort of a large international Buddhist teaching center. And he sent some of the monks and nuns there. He sent Thupten Pemo there. Thupten Pemo, who passed away last year. She was one of the ones ordained in Bodh Gaya, one of the 10 ordained in beginning of 74. Of those 10, all the monks disrobed, most of them after more than 20 years. Of the nuns, Yeshe Kadro is still ordained, and I saw her in Australia a couple of weeks ago, actually, briefly. And Thupten Wongmo, who was ordained then, she disrobed, I think in the 90s briefly, and then she took ordination again, and she's living at Rinpoche's land in Washington. So the others, one of the nuns, 2 of the nuns now have died, and everyone else is still functioning as a layperson. Thupten Pende, who was one of the 10 ordained, is giving this upcoming Kopan course. So, so we were happily ensconced, the Sangha, doing our program, again studying with Geshe Jumpa Gyatso, trying to memorize Abhidhamma Kosha, not very successfully. You memorize one verse and then you forget what you already memorized before. It's not like 6-year-old Tibetan monks, for sure. And then, so then we'd have lunch together, then people would do their individual things in the afternoon. And again, a lot of us were involved in transcribing and publishing. Then we come together in the evening we didn't have an evening meal, we just had tea. And then we did, before lunch, we did Devajsattva Puja, the sadhana that Lama Yeshe had put together. And in the evening, we did before going to bed, we did a Mahakala puja. Lama gave us 4-arm Mahakala, and he put together a sadhana that we used. So, as I said, there are about 15 or 20 of us living IMI life at Kopan. This is 77. But now there were more centres that started, and the centres wanted cheap or free labour. So that was the monks and nuns. And so also people were running out of money in the East. So they started going to the Western centres. Lama sent Thupten Pemo to Manjushu Institute. Nicole Thupten children, not the other Thupten children, Nicole Kedge, she's now Nicole Kedge. She was the SPC there, and Dita also went there, and then also Lama sent Elizabeth to France, Venerable Elizabeth to France. And then one day Lama called me into his room and said that the Indian people have been very kind to the Tibetans, and they gave us the Buddha and the Buddha's teachings, and they developed in India for about 1500 years, but then they started to die out. And at the same time, Dharma started to go to Tibet, and when the Dharma got to Tibet, it was developed to the fullest extent, really, with Mahayana, Sutrayana, and Vajrayana, and it pretty much died out in India. So then, when the uprising against the Chinese occupation happened in 1959, His Holiness and 100,000 Tibetans fled to India, and again they took us in, and they gave us somewhere to stay. They gave us refuge, and so again the Indian people were very kind. So now I feel that this is Lama saying. Lama saying that he felt that the best way to repay the kindness of the Indian people to the Tibetans was to reintroduce the Dharma that had been preserved and developed in Tibet, bring it back to India. So as a start, we should have a centre in Delhi. So I thought, oh yeah, that sounds like a good idea, Lama. And then he said, and I want you to go to Delhi to start the centre. So all of a sudden, I didn't think it was such a good idea. But, Lama says, student does. So off I went. And, most of the centres that had started up to that point were started by the students in the country. The Lamas started travelling in 74, they were 75, 76. Every year they went. And every time they went, there were new centres popping up. When the students, sometimes Lama would say, no, I don't think it's a good idea. Sometimes, yes, it is a good idea to start a centre. And in that case, he'd say, but it's your baby. You have to register, you have to administer it, you have to raise the money, you have to do the legal, and we'll come and give teachings, but the rest, physical stuff, is up to you. But in India, there were no students wanting a centre. Nobody wanted a centre in Delhi except Lama. And there was one Indian student, a woman, who had helped us find the accommodation in Dharamsala when we had to leave Nepal in 76. Her name was Sunita Kakaria. She died a few years ago. So she was fairly well connected from a wealthy family, so she helped a lot and found me a place to stay. And so then I'd go to Delhi and look around, and we had no money. There were no students, so it was, how do you do it? It was, and everything was so expensive. Any place that I thought was suitable for a centre was very expensive. So then I go backwards and forwards. Also, that year, Lama thought that because I was a doctor and a monk, that I should go to the West and give courses for people who were drug dependent. So, and one thing that we noticed was when the students who came to these courses at Kopan in the 70s, you know, they were, you know, old hippies, they were smoking dope, they were dropping acid, they were doing all kinds of things, they were smoking, they were drinking. But then when they got to Kopan, when they got into Dharma, they sort of automatically stopped. It was just a natural thing to stop using whatever they were using, partly because that was the rule at Kopan. You weren't allowed to use anything, especially during the course. But, you know, these external habits kind of dropped away naturally. So Lama thought two things. One, by introducing the Dharma, it might help people who were drug dependent kick the habit. And also the meditation that Lama told me to teach at these short courses, 10-day courses, which were basically, I didn't have any special technique for getting people off drugs. I just taught Lam Rim. And my main objective was to try and interest people enough in the Dharma that they'd go to Kopan and meet the lamas. That was, or else, you know, go to the local centers if there were any, and meet the lamas when they came that time. The meditation Lama had me teaching was what we call he called seed syllable meditation, you know, the inner heat where you visualize the burning ember at the navel and you do the breathing exercise and the fire goes. It's called burning and dripping. I think something like that in Tibetan. Everybody knows that meditation. Seed syllable meditation or inner heat meditation. So Lama's idea was if people could experience generating bliss from within themselves through meditation, they wouldn't need so much to rely on external substances to get, you know, a good feeling. They could just generate it from within themselves. And then they'd stop using external substances because, in fact, they would then find those to be a hindrance rather than of any benefit to their life. So that was the theory. And so I went to Australia and did a few of these courses over the next 2 or 3 years. And Italy, France, England. I didn't do it in America. We didn't have much going on in America in those days, just Vajrapani Institute. So then again in 77, more people got ordained. Tupten Chodron, Susanna, Massimo's wife now. A bunch of people got ordained there. And then Sister Max, who'd started a business in Kathmandu to try and make money for help support Kopan. Up at that time, she'd been teaching in the American school in Kathmandu. And she was a nun, of course, and she donated her salary to support the lamas and the monks at Kopan, but she felt that if she couldn't teach anymore, if she died or something, what would happen to the cash flow going into Kopan? So she thought if she could set up a business that would outlast her, that would be something that would provide continual income to Kopan. So she tried to set up this business in Kathmandu, and she found it was a little difficult. Kathmandu is quite small. So then she moved to Delhi. And then Lama asked Marcel to take over the business, which he called Samsara. And so Marcel, his object was to run the business to support the IMI and also some of the Kopan monks. So there were supposedly two businesses. So again, Marcel Bertels, Dutch monk, he was one of the 10 of us ordained in Bodh Gaya in 74. So he started trying to run this business to support the Sangha, especially the Western Sangha. And Max went to Delhi to do her thing there. And so that happened in the spring of 77. And then, as I mentioned, Lama went to teach Cheni Namche for Geshe Zopa students in Madison. And Rinpoche went to Laudo. Several monks and nuns went up to Laudo that year for the Nyungne, which Rinpoche tried to do each year, to go up to Sakadawa and do Nyungne at Laudo. And, scores of Sherpas came, and more young monks were offered to go to the monastery and like that. So then after Lama finished teaching Geshe Zopa's students and Rinpoche finished at Laudo, Rinpoche went to America, and they taught a sort of a key Lamrim thought transformation. Rinpoche taught Lamrim, Lama taught Vajrapani sadhana, gave Vajrapani initiation, and this was at a place called Yucca Valley in the desert east of Los Angeles, and Vajrapani Institute started from that course. So Anila Ann had been in Australia getting Chenrezig Institute going, and then she came for that course. And Yeshe Kadro, the nun, Australian nun, also one of the ones ordained in Bodh Gaya 74, she went to Australia to become the director of Chenrezig Institute. So the IMI Sangha at this point were playing key roles really in developing the Dharma in the West, either as centre directors or as SPCs. Steve Pearl, he was called Steve Molaski back then, he was ordained with Sangye Kadro by Song Rinpoche at Kopan in 74 after the 6th course. He went to New Zealand to run, or be the SPC anyway, at Dorji Chung Institute. So he was there. Annie Lan was at Vajrapani. As I mentioned, there were a group of Western Sangha, Nicole Dieter and others at Manjushri Institute in North England. Elizabeth had not started Vajrayogini Institute yet. The Lama Tsongkhapa Institute was beginning in 1976, 77, and Piero Cherry and Claudio Cipulo were a couple of Italian monks. They were there. So the IMI was very much involved in those early days. As I said, they were basically slave labor. So that was what Lama had us all doing. And of course, I was in Delhi trying to get the center going there. It took me 2 years to find a suitable place. I don't know if any of you young people remember the Tushita Center in Delhi at Shanti Niketan. It was a really beautiful house, and the center was kind of an oasis in Delhi for students coming and going to India, leaving India, coming down to Delhi to do visas or banking stuff. They stayed there, and also all the big lamas passed through the center in Delhi. And so we, had His Holiness Ling Rinpoche, His Holiness Trijang Rinpoche, Serkong Rinpoche, Geshe Repton, Geshe Zopa. They all taught at Tushita Center, and Lama Yeshe, Lama Zopa Rinpoche stayed there. And at first we had the Australian nun Wendy Finster there in 79 as the SPC, and then Venerable Connie and Venerable Roger came, and they stayed there 80, 81, like that. And then we had Gelag Rinpoche, who lived in Delhi at the time. He was our regular teacher before he went to America. So the Delhi Center was quite active and quite successful in those days. Tricia Donnelly was the manager, and she ran a clothing business and exported clothes. Then she later got ordained. Anyone remembers Tricia? Tupton Lubdron, and then she was director of Root Institute a couple of times, and then she passed away a few years ago. She was extremely helpful in getting Tushita going. So also that year, 77, there were the first ordinations at Chenrezig Institute with Geshe Loden and Zaza Pluku, Lama Yeshe, Lama Zopa Ribush. They ordained Martin Wilson, who then later became one of the first residents at Nalanda. And he did a lot of, translated a bunch of texts while he was at Nalanda that were published by Wisdom in London. Yeah, there was Tony Duff, Lama Tony Duff now, Charlie Top, and a number of other Geshe Loden students got ordained. And then at the end of 77, the 10th course was led by the American monk, Scott Brousseau. So that was 77. So that was really the IMI break, sort of leaving the East and seeding the Western centers. Then towards the end of 78, a number of students took Rabjung at Kopan. I think Venerable Rabina, and then these people got ordained, I think by Tara Tulku in March. There was Vicky Bischoff, Vicky Taylor, and Stefano Piovella, Max Redlich, Andrea Antonietti, Claudio Helmut Holm, Harry Sutton, Jill Ulisse Franchino, Malgani, Bob Alcorn, Julia Maria Busto, Tova Kovaci, and Annie Zia. So there was quite a lot of people ordained there at the beginning of 78. And they continued, those who were at Kopan continued the routine that I mentioned before. So also at Kopan at the end of 75, I mentioned in my previous talk how Lama decided, just the way he decided we need an organization for the monks and nuns, the IMI. At the end of 75, Lama said we need an organization for all the centers, the FPMT. So then we sort of started organizing how the FPMT would, the structure and function of that. So also at the end of 75, we established Wisdom Publications at Kopan. We published the Lama's teachings from America in 74 in our first book, Wisdom Energy. So then after Rabina got ordained, and I was in Delhi, Lama sent her to Delhi to help me develop Wisdom Publications in Delhi. As again, it was had more facilities than Kathmandu. So we started doing that, Venerable Rabina and I. And actually, I taught a Lam Rim course with Rabina as my assistant. In March of 1978, we did this Lam Rim course in Delhi, trying to repay the kindness of the Indian people. But the Indian people weren't all that interested, to be honest, in being helped in that way. But anyway, we kept going. So now I was staying with some friends in Old Delhi, a couple who had a business in Geneva, and they had a clothing business, and they were making clothes in India to supply their business in Geneva. And they had a big old house, and they let me stay there. So there was this young woman who'd been at a Kopan course, and she agreed to help me start the center by being the secretary, and she was staying at this house too. So the house was quite big, and then she was in this room, and then I was in a small room on the side, and then you had to go out to get outside into the garden. That one way was to go through my room. So it was extremely hot, and she would have a cold shower and just put on a dress with nothing underneath. Excuse me telling the story. And then she would walk through my room, and it was not very good for my mind. I can tell you that. And anyway, there was one. So I was having sort of layman thoughts rather than monastic thoughts, and opposite this house was Ladakh Bud Vihar. I don't know if you know that place in Delhi. It was where Bakula Rinpoche used to stay, and there was the Lama who ran it was a Ladakhi Lama called Lama Lobsang. So I went and talked to him about this situation, and he said I should leave the house immediately, you know, and go and live somewhere else, you know, separate myself from the situation. But I didn't do that because I just needed the base, and I didn't really have anywhere else to go. And I remember then when the lamas came, I was riding in a rickshaw with Rinpoche, and I told him about the situation and, you know, what I was thinking, and he just sort of brushed it off, really, just shook his head. He says, "Oh, it's just the conditions," you know. So, I mean, I guess what he really meant was you should change the conditions if it's, you know, helping ripen karma that you don't want to ripen. And but anyway, she left. She went to at the end of 78, she went to the Kopan course, and the situation kind of resolved itself because those people gave up the house. And then Tricia lost her job so that's where I met Tricia, sorry. She was the manager of these people's house and their business. She was their business manager in Delhi. So then Sister Max, who'd moved to Delhi, as I mentioned, had a couple of rooms in Tibet House in Delhi, which at that time was at 16 Jorbagh. It was an old house, and in the basement, on the ground floor, there was the Tibetan Review newspaper, and Sister Max had a couple of rooms upstairs, and the rest of the house was occupied by the beginnings of Tibet House, which then later on moved further up the road to the Lodi estate, and is quite a big place now and very active. But it was just kind of getting going back then. So Sister Max Mummy Max had 2 rooms there. So Tricia and I moved into those rooms while we tried to find a center. And so I would spend a lot of the time going out in rickshaws to different areas. And then Peter Kedge, who was a monk, he was ordained by Trijang Rinpoche in 76 in Dharamsala. In that large group with Annie Karen and Roger and Gyatso, Adrian Feldman, and there were Elizabeth, and probably 8 or 10 people ordained by His Holiness Trijang Rinpoche at Tushita in 76. Lost my train of thought by jumping back.
In which year are you now?
78. Beginning of 79, actually. 79. So anyway, long story short, I went out and so I was saying Peter Kedge was the Lama's assistant, and he was also managing the money. So he actually lent me $10,000 to pay the first year's rent on a center if we found it. And I found this beautiful house, and I had the money, so we rented this house in the middle of 79. And then I went to Australia to do more Kick the Habit courses, and I left Sunita and Tricia and Wendy Finster, the nun, to develop the center. And then I traveled for most of 79. Then when I came back towards the end of 79, the center had become quite well established and very nicely decorated, and people were coming to stay. It served as a guest house, and then Tricia started this clothing business, and then we had all these different teachings going on, and Gelug Rinpoche was teaching, and so that's how the Tushita Center got started in Delhi. So also, so that was 79, but again, jumping back to 78, 78 was the first year that Song Rinpoche, Lama Yeshe, brought Song Rinpoche to the West, and he went to the United States and England and France and Italy and Spain. I know he gave a course in Ibiza, and in France at Saint-La Baume, something like that. They rented a place, and in Italy at Lama Tsongkhapa Institute. So also when Song Rinpoche was at Manjushri, we had the first CPMT meeting ever there. So centers came from about 14 or 15. The directors came from about 14 or 15 centers to Manjushri Institute. And also at that time, Lama explained his plan for developing the Geshe Studies program and the idea to bring a second Geshe. Of course, Kelsang Gyatso was there teaching Lamrim and Lojong and stuff like that. But then they brought another Geshe called Geshe Konchok Tsewong to teach. And there were quite a few monks and nuns at Manjushri Institute then, Nicole and Dita and Tupten Yeshi and Tupten Wongmo and Sangi Kadro, Tupten Pande. There must have been 8 or 10 Western monks, and Lama wanted that sort of to be at that point the headquarters of the FPMT, of the FPMT's teaching program, and where the monks and nuns would study the Geshe program, not the full 20-year one, but Lama was trying to devise something like what became the master's program at Lama Tsongkhapa Institute. But I think it was actually a 12-year program that Lama discussed to develop at Manjushri Institute, and he worked with the Gelugpa Society and to try and make it official. So that was kind of in the planning, and people were coming. And then later on, I forget what happened to Geshe Tsewong. Maybe he stayed there. Then Geshe Tekchok came, and he began teaching the actual studies. Then, just briefly to jump ahead, when things blew up at Manjushri Institute and Kelsang Gyatso tried to take the place, did take the place over and basically kicked the FPMT out. Then at that point, Nalanda had just begun, so Geshe Tekchok went to Nalanda, and but I've gone too far ahead. So so in 79, I think that really established the activities of the FPMT sort of going forward, that the lamas would go to the West in the middle of the year. There was only one, in the early years, for 3 years, there were 2 Kopan courses a year. Then when the lamas started traveling extensively in 75, then it just became the November course. And the lamas would come to Kopan for Losar, and then go to the West, then come back. And often, nearly always before their trip, and when they returned from their trip, they would go to Dharamsala to meet with His Holiness and get his advice and keep His Holiness informed as to what they were doing. So His Holiness was very much involved in all the FPMT activities as a result of the Lama's visits to him at least twice a year. And then often in the summer, the Western Sangha would leave Kopan and go to Dharamsala and study at the Tibetan Library with Geshe Ngondagi. So as I mentioned, yeah, there were a number of IMI Sangha that were center directors. Konchog Donma, Bonnie Rothenberg, who retired to Dharamsala, I'm not quite sure where she is now. She was running Tara Institute in Melbourne. Anne was running Chenrezig, and then Vajrapani, Yeshikado at Chenrezig. Elizabeth started Vajrayogini Institute. The Spanish nun, Champa Cherki, now Jamyang Wongmo, she was director of Laudo. Stefano Piavella, Italian monk, he was director of Tushita, and I was running Tushita in Delhi. So these days, not many Sangha are the center directors, are they? I think Fabienne is in London. What's her name? Children, is it? Not sure.
Roma.
Of course, Nalanda, but it doesn't count.
Fabienne Roma.
Doma, yeah?
Mm.
Yeah. So, you know, we have Sangha running in Nalanda, yes, and as it should be. And so that was pretty much the shape of the FPMT, and it remained a bit like that the next couple of years. In January 1980, there was the second CPMT meeting that was held at Kopan, and that at that stage it was becoming clear that there was something going wrong at Manjushri Institute. Anyway, I don't need to get into all those politics at this point. The Lama sent Peter Kedge to Hong Kong to start a business to make money for Kopan, and Nicole went with him. So I think in 1980 there was the fire at Vajrayogini Institute, and then as I understand it, there was some insurance money, and with that Elizabeth was able to buy Nalanda. And initially it was her idea was to make it for the nuns, but pretty soon after that Lama said no, but Nalanda should be for the monks. And I think in 81 Adrian Gyatso went there. In 1981, I think towards the end of the year, Lama wrote to all the monks and nuns who are now spread out all over the world, and maybe there are 80 or 100 of us. He wanted everybody to come together just to support each other and to really give us confidence that how many of us there were and what a strong organization, what a strong body it was, even though we were spread out all over the globe. He wanted to have a Dharma celebration where all the monks and nuns came together. So the idea, and so Lama wrote to them, start thinking about this, how to do it, and if you can free yourself up, it would be more than a year away. So 1980 passed pretty much like the other years. Then in 1981, there was the third CPMT meeting. That was at Tushita, and there were probably 15 or 20 center directors came to that, and then we all had an audience with His Holiness. And then initially, I think Marcel and Sangye Kadro was supposed to be organizing this Dharma celebration for the monks and nuns, but nothing much was happening. And I remember Lama was at Tushita and sort of a bit concerned that things weren't coming together. And at that point, Lama's idea was to have the first part in Bodh Gaya in January up to Tibetan New Year, about 6 weeks in Bodh Gaya, then have a break for Tibetan New Year. The Lamas would go to Kopan, and then part 2 would be in Dharamsala. And Song Rinpoche had been invited to give Haruka Bodhi Mandala, Guya Samaja, and Chud initiations and teachings, and we were all supposed, so that was going to be the second, and His Holiness was invited to give Mahamudra teachings, and other lamas like Serkon Rinpoche and Ling Rinpoche would also give at least a talk or teaching. So I offered to help organize it if Lama wanted, because I was living in Delhi at the time, and I knew how to organize things. So so Lama said, okay. So then I became director of this, what became known as Enlightened Experience Celebration, or EEC. And Venerable Roger was also staying at Tushita then, and he became my assistant organizer and the treasurer to run the money. What a team. So so then we set about organizing it, and accommodation, and I mean, teaching location and accommodation and food, how to provide the food, and just all the logistics that went into organizing an event for 80 or 100 people. Then all the lay people heard about it, and they started complaining. They wanted to come too, and of course we were like, no, this is for the Sangha. You can't come. You're the lay people, and we're the professionals. We need professional training just for us. But anyway, they cried and they complained, and Lama eventually relented. I think he could see it might be easier to finance if a whole bunch of lay people came and paid their way. So I'm just realizing that for the first time now. But anyway, so they finished up over this. So it worked like that. There was part one in Bodh Gaya, and Rinpoche gave Rinjung Gyatso. He only got through the first half, and he finishing it in 85 or 86 at the second Enlightened Experience celebration. And then there are teaching. We had Vinaya teachings from Taratuku and Taratuku or Damalocha Rinpoche, I can't remember now. And then there was Losar. Then we went to Dharamsala. We had the second part there. And so over that whole thing, there probably, the Sangha did both parts, and the lay people came and went a little bit, but it must have been 300 people came through the whole thing. And it was very successful. And at the end of the teachings, then we did, the Sangha, IMI Sangha did a group Guya Samaja retreat together, I think about 80 of us at Tushita with the fire puja and all that. And so what else? That's 1982. So then after that, everybody went back to their various places. Like at the end of a puja, you send all the deities back. So all the monks and nuns and lay people went back to their life. And I stayed on at Tushita to work with Rinpoche on a new edition of the Wish Fulfilling Golden Sun, Rinpoche's Lam Rim textbook. And Lama went to Tibet. And then after 2 or 3 months working with Rinpoche, not getting very much done on the Wish Fulfilling Golden Sun, then Rinpoche went back to Kopan in August. I went with him to continue working. And the other thing that Lama tried to energize during the Enlightened Experience celebration was tried to encourage more monks to go to Nalanda, and he said part of the reason for organizing this big gathering of the monks and nuns was to try and give some energy to develop Nalanda. So then Gyatso went back. I don't think that many monks and nuns really went back with him at that time. It was it was a pretty quiet time at Nalanda, I think, in those days. Anyway, he did one of these talks, didn't he, last year? And I'm sure he's told the story better than I can about Nalanda in those days. But it was a bit of a challenge.
Already quite quickly, Geshe Shock came from England, and then quite quickly there were already 30, 40 people, and it was also the maximum size of the Gompa at that time, I think.
Right.
They had already Doje Pamo 82, 81, 82, 83, 84.
Yeah, that's right.
That collapsed, but Nalanda, I think, was as long as Geshe Tekshok was here, had been quite successful.
Yeah, that's true. Of course, Pende was there, and Steve and Martin Wilson. You're right. Yeah, I remember His Holiness came in '82, and there's a group photo with quite a lot of monks there. Actually, you're right. Yeah. So yeah, so then His Holiness also visited, was in France and Italy and Spain on that tour, and there was a universal education conference at Lama Tsongkhapa Institute, and then Lama gave a big teaching at the end of '82, beginning of '83, on the 6 yogas of Naropa, and all the monks and nuns came from everywhere for that. There are probably 60 or 80 of us there at the 6 yogas teaching. Then there was a disastrous Christmas party in the Gompa during a Christmas break in the 6 yogas of Naropa's teachings. You can see video of that on YouTube of after Lamas, he gave a Christmas talk, as he often used to do at Kopan. And then afterwards, people came up one by one and got a blessing. And then you can hear the music starting in the background and some of the monks and nuns dancing. And then there was an English monk who freaked out that the monks and nuns were dancing in the Gompa, and there was a Tara. You know Alfredo, the sculptor in Lama Tsongkhapa Institute? I think he made the Chenrezig statue, the four-arm Chenrezig, and he made a beautiful Tara, sort of huge tsatsa thing. And this guy smashed it on the altar because everyone was dancing in the Gompa. So that was that. So then in '83, Lama finished the 6 yogas teachings. We had the 4th CPMT meeting at Lama Tsongkhapa Institute. I organized an editing retreat for Wisdom Publications with Hermes Brandt and Steve Carlier and Robin Brentano, a couple other people. John Landau was leading it, trying to teach everyone how to edit Lama Yeshe's teachings. Didn't really work out. And then the director of Wisdom Publications resigned. So then Lama sent me out of Delhi to London to take over Wisdom Publications. As Lama said that, he shook his head and said, London is a very bad place for monks and nuns. Eventually, I proved that to be correct. Also, Rabina and Yeshikadra were with me. So we were trying to get Wisdom Publications going, or keep it going rather, and develop it. And also that time, Lama created the FPMT board, made about 12 people. And he said, this was in the beginning of '83, and he said, I may not live much longer. And in fact, he passed away a year later. And he said, so after I'm gone, the board will run the FPMT, so Rinpoche doesn't have to get involved in running the organization. And Rinpoche can be free just to give teachings, and the board will run the organization. That's not really quite what happened, but anyway, that was the plan. So we started the board, and we never really met until after Lama's cremation, actually. And in Vajrapani, the number of board members were there, 7 or 8 out of the 12, and we met together, and then we formally asked Rinpoche to take over running the FPMT. And at first Rinpoche didn't want, he said, no, we should ask Geshe Rabten. He said no. Ask Song Rinpoche. He said no. I think asked somebody else. He said no. So eventually nobody wanted to run it. So, I mean, this is Rinpoche being humble, of course, but we wanted Rinpoche to run it, and as we know, he did. So Lama came to Nalanda in 83, and he gave 6 yogas teachings in Vajrapani Institute. He gave those teachings again. And then at the Kopan course, the 16th course, Lama really started to manifest being ill. And then he got so sick they had to send him to Delhi. And he recovered there a little bit, enough to be able to go to the United States, to California. And as we know, then on the morning of Losar, 1984, Lama passed away and was cremated at Vajrapani. A lot of the Sangha came for Lama's cremation. And then, as I said, the board asked Rinpoche to take over. So I think the 5th CPMT was in England in January 74. Then Lama went to America, passed away. Then in 86, Ursel was recognized as the reincarnation of Lama Yeshe. So, I'd been having a very hard time as a monk for 3 years in London, 83 to 86. When I went there, I didn't wear robes anymore, just because I thought I was running a business in central London. And at that time, I mean, it was a mistake looking back, but I thought at the time people would relate better, if I'm going to the bank or trying to rent property, going in as a monk, because everyone thought we were Hare Krishnas back then. They didn't really know. You walk down the street as a shaved head Tibetan monk, and people going Hare Krishna, So so I wore lay clothes, and I didn't. We didn't have much money, so we lived in kind of derelict buildings that were either squats or had been condemned. But you're allowed to live there temporarily if they were safe. And so you get up in the morning, you go to the office, and then you go home to this depressing building at night. And, I began, all my bad habits started to come to the surface. And I was thinking more as a layperson than as a monk. And, then I started to get interested in my secretary, and that was more conflict. So I wanted to stay as a monk, but it was getting more and more difficult because I hadn't got control over my mind. And I certainly had a lot of bad habits from before I met the Dharma. So I called, Rinpoche was in Delhi, so I called him and said, I want to talk to him and ask his permission to disrobe. And And as it happened, Yeshe Kado was with him, and she answered the phone, and Rinpoche wouldn't talk to me. And he just said, if I want to talk to him, I'd have to go there to Delhi. So I went. So I went to Delhi. And the day before or the day after I arrived, Ursula arrived with Maria, his mother, to meet His Holiness, and for His Holiness to confirm or unconfirm that he was the incarnation of Lama Yeshe. So we stayed at Tushita, which was in a different place by that time. It was 86. And so I went to, so all the activity was around Ursel and all that. Rinpoche was busy, and they took him to see His Holiness. And then, so I hadn't really had a chance to talk to Rinpoche. And so then we went to Dharamsala, and because of the assassination of Indira Gandhi in a couple of years earlier, it was still a little difficult to go through the Punjab, through Chandigarh and stuff. So we took a taxi. So there was Rinpoche and Ursel and his mother, Maria, and Yeshe Kado, Max Redlich, and me. And we drove up through the night up to Tushita. We got to McLeod Ganj, and then we walked up the hill to Tushita, and I carried Ursel on my shoulders. I had a little bit longish hair, not as long as this, but Rinpoche made some comment about my hair on the way in the taxi. Anyway, we got to Dharamsala, and then so then Rinpoche did the things with Ursel, with Lama's malas and the Dorji and Bell, and he was picking out the right ones and all that. And then His Holiness had also confirmed, actually before that, that he thought he was the unmistaken reincarnation of Lama Yeshe. So then finally Rinpoche said to me, so you want to talk to me about something? So then I explained it was difficult in London, blah, blah, blah. And I think, it'd be better if I disrobed. And so then Rinpoche did a mo, and he looked surprised, and he did it again, and he looked surprised. And he did it again, looked surprised. He said, well, according to this, it looks like it would be more beneficial if you changed. So he didn't say disrobe. The way Rinpoche, what he called disrobing, he called changing. I think changing from nirvana to samsara or something. So it looks better. So according to this, it looks better if you change. So I thought, oh, okay, good. That's kind of a weight off my shoulders. Now that decision clear. So then the next day, Rinpoche called me back and said, look, about yesterday, he said, when you do a mo, you can ask the question in different ways. So when I asked the question yesterday, I asked the question, what is the best, is it the best thing for you, so that's for me, is it the best thing for you to change or not? And it came out, the best thing for you is to change. But then I did it again, and I asked the question, what is the best thing for sentient beings, for you to change or not? And that time, the mo came out, so no, for the sake of sentient beings, it's better if you don't change. So I don't think you should change. Then no, so then it depends on you. If you care more for yourself than sentient beings, if you care more for yourself, you will change. Otherwise, stay as a monk. And then he went into retreat, not talking to anybody. So then so after being up, then I came down again. And I thought, what an impossible thing. If you care more for yourself than sentient beings, we are supposed to care more for sentient beings than ourselves, right? So then I kind of walked around in the woods for a day or two at Tushita, wondering how I'm going to deal with this, And then I got a note from Rinpoche, and and also what I told him was, if I have two choices. If it's better for me to continue running wisdom publications in London, then I should return my ordination. If it's better that I stay as a monk, then I need to leave wisdom publications and go to Nalanda and live in a monastic community. So that was the way I saw it. So then in the note, Rinpoche wrote back and said, look, Lama Yeshe gave you the job of running wisdom publications. So I think that's important that you continue to do that. So when you go back to London, just try and, maintain your ordination. But if it's too difficult, then you can go and see Geshe Wangchen. So Geshe Wangchen was the Geshe at the London Manjushri Centre, Jamyang Centre then. So I went back. I didn't really try hard. I was already given up in my mind. So then after a month, I went to see Geshe Wangchen and, respectfully returned the ordination. So I lost my membership in the IMI. So I think that's enough of my story.
So
the moral is stay in the monastery. Don't wear lay clothes. Shave your head, and control your mind.
Yes, that's a good advice for everyone. Control the mind. Yes.
Yes, as a member of the younger Sangha in Nalanda, although I'm not very young, but can I ask you, how are you looking at that situation and that period from this point? And do you think that maybe you would do something else, knowing what followed?
Hard to say. I mean, I look at it as a failure, I mean, when I got ordained, like all of us, it was supposed to be a lifetime commitment. And, there's a way out. You don't get excommunicated, but and, I can, as Rinpoche said, it's the conditions. So I put myself into difficult conditions. Conditions were difficult for me. I mean, Venerable Rabina was with me a lot of the time, and she's still a nun, So, it's a question of not having proper renunciation, really. That's and still being subject to being controlled by attachment. So, it's all undesirable, but you have to recognize, if looking back, if I wanted to stay as a monk, I would have left wisdom publications and stayed in Nalanda, and maybe I'll still be there, having all you young people look after me, bring me breakfast in bed and stuff like that, But
tell Nala.
That's not what happened. And now I look at wisdom publications, and you see the incredible work that is being done. I mean, mainly after I left, but I left in order to run the archive of Lama Yeshe and Lama Zopa Rinpoche's teachings, and we've done so much more of those teachings are now available. So looking at what I've done in the last 40 years, I can't say that's wrong either, If I could have done all that as a monk, it would have been so much better, for me anyway. But my mind wasn't strong enough. What can I say? So, I think some good came out of it. Sorry.
Sorry, yeah, I didn't hear what you say now. Anyway, but so you always stayed within FPMT Mandala in different roles. So you were always on top of all the developments. You have been to many big retreats where you still stayed in touch with all these people. So what is your impression of the role of the IMI? Because in the beginning it was very clear, like organized a little bit around Rinpoche and about setting up certain things. So what is your impression later in the 90s and in the beginning of the 2000s, how the IMI functioned? Do you
Well,
have
look, I mean, when I met the lamas in October, November 1972, they were the first people that I met that I felt I wanted to be like them, you know. But I'd met some very good people up till that point, but I never wanted to be like them. But I met the lamas. So then being like them meant becoming a monk. So, and I thought when I became a monk that these were the days there was no Western centers. You know, we kind of thought we'd always be staying in Nepal and Dharamsala and Bodh Gaya and going between those places, you know. No idea what was going to happen. And so I thought becoming a monk, I was entering a life of study, meditation, and teaching. And that's what I thought my life was going to be. But then, like I said, in 77, Lama sent me to Delhi to start a center, to run a business, basically. And but Lama always said the role of the Sangha is to become teachers. So in those days, when the organization was just beginning, that the monks and nuns were key in developing the centers. Now the centers can easily be managed and by lay people, and the Sangha, I think the role of the Sangha is to study, meditate, and teach, and that was always Lama's main aim for the monks and nuns, that they be you're monks and nuns, you're teachers, you know. So to become teachers, you have to be educated. So I think, I don't know, what's the plan? Is there a program at Nalanda from beginning to end to become a Geshe, or is it structured like that, or?
Oh, there's of course basic program, which is 5 years, and master program, so people can roll on, say, within these studies and cultivate their mind in the meantime for about 12 years. Yeah, then then quite some of us teach irregular or more or less regular. A few have left Nalanda to teach, indeed. So there's a few who teach within FPMT, who have done the basic program here and part of the whole master program. Yeah, and some stay here also because they feel not ready yet to, so still feel that they have to integrate more. Yeah, like me.
Yeah, like I was thinking for me, but there's also some IMI monks at Sarah doing Geshe.
Yeah, we had Geshe Namdak, of course, is very famous now in the meantime in London, and then Geshe Leksok has finished his studies. There's 2 other American monks, I think it's close to direction finishing, so they might still, for 1 or 2 or 3 years, still continue. But also they follow the advice of Lama Zopa Rinpoche, like Namjong, who was almost finished, who studied there, so I think for 16, 17 years in Sera. He follows the advice of Lama Zopa Rinpoche to go now in retreat, so
yeah.
I was in Sera, of course, also. If people became Geshe, then some stayed to continue Sera because they need seniors and have senior monks in all kind of important positions. And then some went into retreat, and some went to the West. So, yeah, it's here with these Western monks and nuns a bit the same, of course. So, yeah.
I have a
So
question.
anyway, as to your question, the role of IMI, I think, is to become teachers. Not necessarily everybody, but you know, not everybody in the monastery becomes Geshe either. So, you know.
Yeah. Can I ask a question?
Yeah, of course.
In your opinion, so I'll opposite answer in the question, but could it be that so many people disrobed in the earlier days because there was not a functioning community staying in one place and studying one program? Or more communities dispersed around the world where people can go to?
Well, I think each person has their own story. If you have to generalize, it's because like me, you know, the mind was weak and not able to withstand the environment. And that's partly because there weren't enough monasteries. Not everybody could go to Nalanda. And also, I think people, I'm not sure financially whether people went to Nalanda had to support themselves in those early days. And also, as I said, you know, in the early days, all these new centers needed people who could work there full time without getting paid. And the first person you look at are the monks and nuns, you know. But the monks and nuns are good to be at the centers because they know more Dharma than all the other people around them, and they can also teach. But it being in a environment where there aren't other monks or nuns, maybe not even one other one, then it's quite difficult to, unless your mind is really strong before you go into that situation. I think it's a combination of factors, not having a place where you could live with other monks or other nuns and develop your mind and strengthen your mind such that, you know, you get control over your desire and, you know, especially sexual desire, to be honest. I mean, nobody disrobes because they want to kill somebody, you know. So it's partly not having a place, partly having to go out and work in these kind of lonely environments, you know, and unsupported, partly not having, there not being enough money to support monks and nuns. But really, fundamentally, it comes down to the individual person's mind not having strong enough renunciation, really.
Yeah, and during the programs, of course, we are the whole time reminded. So that it's especially the basic program is an integrative program. So it's not only intellectual. So we get from our teachers regularly reminders, and that the community is in that way very helpful. Yeah. So.
Yeah, that's what I mean. That's why they established monasteries and nunneries. So
yeah.
People could go there, make their mind strong, and then when their mind is strong, they go out and help others. You know.
Yes. Yeah. So more questions?
No, just a comment. You know, from my point of view, we cannot do about personal practice anything like IMI. But now I feel that we are in a period that
You're frozen. Okay. What shall we do? What shall I? Whoop. Now they've gone. Don't know if they're coming back or what.
Oh.
Where are you?
Oh, I can talk now.
Yeah. Where are you?
Suggest let's wait a while.
You think? Okay.
Maybe they
You-
restart.
Are you at Nalanda or where?
No, I'm a single in Munich, Germany now.
Oh,
Hmm.
you go to the center?
No.
Hmm.
No.
Is Fedor still there?
Fedor is in retreat, a 3-year retreat, and it's discussion about he would take another retreat. So I don't know what's going on there. So
Yeah.
I was in the Institute Lama Tsongkhapa for a while for the basic program, but now I stay in Munich.
And do what?
Yeah, that's a good question. My father died last year, so I have to take a little bit care of my mother.
Yeah.
And I can't leave her alone so much. She's fit, but yeah, maybe for 1 week I can leave her alone, but it's always something there. So I can't go anywhere, is my feeling.
Yeah, no, it's important to look after your mother for sure.
So it's just like I'm stuck here and waiting.
When were you ordained?
The Getsu, I got 2017 in Italy from Lama Zopa.
Oh,
And then I was 1 year in Nalanda. So I know the life there.
yeah.
But then I thought the grass is greener on the other side. So I went to Italy. Oh, yeah.
And how was the grass in Italy?
Somehow it was, I liked it more, yeah.
So how long did you do the basic program? Did you do the whole thing or?
Yeah. It was the Corona time, so the first time was in the Gompa, then less in the Gompa, then it was online. Okay.
Right, of course.
This was the best time to spend the time for the Corona time. This was so wonderful. Not only the
Yeah.
institute, also outside, all the surrounding. So you know the institute, or I guess.
Pomaya?
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I've been, not for a while, but I've been there many times before.
Yeah, below the institute, there's some, how you say, tourist village. So it's called La Pieve.
Okay.
Maybe it was not there when you were there. So there I had a room, so I was outside Nalanda, outside Lama Tsongkhapa.
Okay.
Mm.
Yeah, no, I haven't been there for 20 years, I guess, at least.
Yes.
Okay, so Wang Shala, I think maybe we'll give up at this point.
Seems so.
Maybe they're not coming back. They had enough.
Oh,
Okay,
yeah.
anyway, nice to meet you. Thank you.
You're okay, thank you.
And keep on trucking.
I keep on waiting. Okay,
Okay,
and I
thank you.
leave the
Bye-bye.
Zoom and we finish. Okay, bye-bye.
Bye.